pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Certify that the meeting has been duly noticed. Roll call. Chrissy?
Yes.
Becca? Cedric? Here. Corey?
Here.
Brad?
Yes.
Me? Al? Donna Alvarado is absent this evening. Need to approve the agenda. Motion for that?
I'll make a motion for the agenda.
Motion by Brad,
I'll second.
second by Becca. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any public comment this evening? Papers? A motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion to approve that consent agenda.
Motion by Brad,
Second.
second by Chrissy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Go into district administrator reports.
Sure. So the first one is the library plan, and this is actually also later new business for approval. And this is an update, from the prior library plan. And I can just tell you a couple of the general changes are, there's an addition of the Flipster magazine, just because those were things we didn't have, some additional language around makerspace. Because that wasn't something that was in place before. As well as we did ask, our attorney to look through it for language, so he made some wording changes, some language changes, or did some different statutory references, because we knew there were some concerns, with kind of the plan and selection of books, and we wanted to make sure we were following the things we needed to follow there. We also tried to kind of make more user-friendly what we would call the reconsideration policy. Try to speak towards the end. So what that is if someone has any material, so it wouldn't have to be a book, it could be a video or something from the library. First, they would meet with the library media specialist and talk about their concerns. That's just an informal concern. If they want, they can do a formal reconsideration request where they just complete this and just ask, fill out what's their objection. It also talks about, when you look at number 5, what do you want the library to do with this material? So part of it is just please don't assign it to my child. Parents have that ability if there are things that they prefer their child not check out, or withdraw it from all students and present it to a reconsideration committee. And then if it goes to the reconsideration committee, that consists of teachers, community members, the library media specialist, 2 students that look at the item, look at reviews around the item, and then make a recommendation as far as a whole, whether or not it should be in the library. And then this is just sort of the checklist to make sure we follow that. There is then, if desired, the complainant, who is the person who filed the complaint, can file an appeal to the school board within 3 days, if that's something that they wish to do. And then the school board writes the final decision if there's an appeal.
Is there already a committee formed for that?
The principal will put that committee together just because they want it done somewhat timely within 10 days, so especially when we look at community members, we want to make sure it's diverse, but that it's somebody that can look at the item and make sure to get it done within that 10-day window.
So it's not a set committee?
It's not a standing committee. And I don't know, I mean, in this district since I've been here, so this will be my 4th year, we haven't gone through that process.
Our district, or our library media specialist?
Yes, is Nick.
Mr. Copeland, okay, that's one question I had. can you get me up, I was going through this thing
Mhm.
today, marker space.
Oh, makerspace.
Makerspace, what is it?
Basically, like the makerspace is like what I have back here. So it's got 3D printers, robotics, things, and coding and everything. So the kids have free exploration of those things within the library. And then both libraries have one.
Okay.
Things that the state budget doesn't allow for anymore.
That sounds like I don't even know a lot of touch. So in the selection process of that is just the principal
Of that committee.
of that committee.
The selection process of books kind of goes through, I mean, there's recommendations to the library media specialist from agencies, I'll say around like the children's library.
There was another committee at the beginning that wasn't part of that. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Okay, the responsibility of selection,
Oh,
okay? In
Yep.
there, it talks about, however, the board delegates primary responsibility of selecting library materials to the professional staff and for the district. Blah, blah. The selection process will involve many individuals, including faculty, students, administrators, community members, and the licensed library and media specialist.
mhm.
So is that,
So it isn't necessarily a committee that reviews everything, but there are typically, we all have community members that will wanna donate items for the library, or recommend items for the library.
Yeah.
Teachers will recommend items just based on content they have, they'll say, I wish we had more books on whatever.
Yeah, so like I might have teachers come in, or like online I've got a form that students or teachers can fill out, and they just, you know, like when I go to
To
purchase
request
things,
them.
I go with those requests first. So those get purchased because those are ones that students actually want and everything. So it's not like an actual like committee that sits down and does that. Technically, as a library media specialist, anything that's purchased in the library comes from the Common School Fund,
Okay.
and that has to be spent by a licensed library media specialist.
So does that go under any review then, or is that just per your?
Like my selection.
Your
So those recommendations that come from staff and everything, and then like I had told like Mrs. Stark and we had sat down and talked, and I use, you know, say like the Horn Book or School Library Journal. These are my two go-tos. So this reviews every single publication that comes out every, you know, so many months. And those selections then are made from there. Or else I use a service called Junior Library Guild, and that has a whole bunch of librarians that make selections, and they just box them up based on what's being published. And then I get like 10 books sent each month, you know, from them for each library. And usually when going with, say, like the Horn Book or School Library Journal, I tend to select the ones that they've starred. And what that basically means is these are ones that those professional publications recommend that every single public school library has.
How many new books do we select per year?
It depends on how much they cost and everything. I would say probably 400 or 500 is what I can afford in each library. But I mean that price or that fluctuates based on, you know, how much a certain book costs and everything as well.
So do we weed that many out every year also then?
No, we do not. So
there's a giant stockpile somewhere.
no, well, I guess I should say I should take that back. I probably do read about that many. You know, like when I sit down and do like the specific nonfiction sections and everything, yeah, probably about that many come out and everything. And then anything that's in like, you know, with the fiction, I have like a whole process that's in the weeding, you know, policies and everything there too. So they, you know, they get pulled out, you know, if they haven't been checked out in 5 years and things like that. And then like I do have a stockpile of some things, because those, like we've given them away on like family nights and stuff, like we'll just set them out for, you know, students and families to take.
Yes, but this is I'll say a friendlier version, so once this is approved, then this will go. So it's a little bit easier to access. Any other questions at this time?
I've got a list.
Okay.
All right, so I kind of worked through this. I looked through some of this today. The one thing I guess I'd really like before I'm comfortable approving this would be kind of how we do the other approvals, where it's what is the existing policy with the new policy and the things that were struck out and the things that were added. So that really helps me understand exactly what's being changed. There's no way I could tell you right now what was really changed in here. I certainly don't have the old one memorized, and I don't really want to go through the old one line by line and compare it with the new one. So I don't know if you have that in draft version, or if this one was just completely rebuilt from scratch.
It wasn't, I'm just, sorry, I'm trying to think of talking at the same time. You know, part of it is like those sections, so like makerspace as a whole, that's something that's just brand new.
Right.
The piece that I was gonna look at is more the attorney language changes.
So again, we won't solve that tonight, but I think
Right.
for me to make it approve this policy, that would be something I would have to see. The other thing too is I'd want to make sure, like, once I have that, then I can talk to, people in the community about that too. I haven't had a chance to do that.
Okay.
And for me, that's pretty important because that's why I got elected. So I want to make sure that I also have their concerns there. And I apologize too to Jenny earlier. I literally emailed a list of questions and it sat in my draft inbox. I actually didn't send it, so.
So just as an example though, and because I didn't share this, but these are the changes that he recommended.
Perfect, yeah, that's
So
what I'm
that's kind
looking
of
for
what
right
you're
there.
talking about.
Yeah, if you could share that with me or the
Okay.
board, that would be very beneficial to me understanding what we really changed.
Okay.
In that same line there a little bit, and you might be able to answer this, what appendixes, if any, were added as part of this change?
I don't believe any appendixes were added, and I'll look quickly, I don't think, because like the ALA statement, that's their statement, so the attorney didn't do anything with that.
Okay. Yeah, and again, that's part of what, I didn't know, so I was just
I
curious,
guess-
like, have these appendixes always been part of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, those, if you don't mind, like those are pretty standard
Okay.
in any school library
Yeah.
policies. You always have those appendices.
So the appendices haven't changed at all from the prior, and I would say those have been the same for many years.
Okay, all right,
I don't know how you find many, I'll say over 5 years.
Since before I started.
sure.
Yeah.
So
Sure. All right. Is this also a normal thing that we review this policy at this time of year, or did this come up because there was concern in the district about the library policy? How did it get on the agenda, I guess is what I'm.
It was actually something that Nick and I started talking about in the spring, some of it just because we wanted to add the makerspace language and the others, but we felt like we wanted it to be closer to kind of a back to school time. So, I guess, I don't know that it's always August, but,
This was
I
the
think I
first
would say
time
yes to some of
I've
both
seen
of that. There were concerns brought up, so it made sense
Okay.
also to look at it so that people know,
All right, so-
especially, we wanna make sure people know what the reconsideration practice is.
So it's not something we do yearly, this was just something that
Correct.
you had some issues.
Because
Nick
we
some
had some
issues,
bigger
and-
changes.
And then we had some community concerns, it
Yes.
sounds like. Okay, all right, that makes sense. I'm just trying to understand, like, is
Yep.
this something we're gonna do every year, or, how often do we revisit this? Okay. One of the appendixes in there, and I'm just gonna state this just so people kind of see where I'm coming from a little bit, and I understand you're saying these are fairly regular, I think it's Appendix C. Kind of, in a way, reads to me saying that due to the way it's written, anything's allowed in the library, right? And I think that's okay to a certain extent, but then I just wanna make sure that from a policy standpoint, there's that policy, and this is where I'll talk a little bit about where, again, on the town board, I learned this, there's the letter of the law, and then there's the spirit of the law, right? And so the letter of the law, this would pretty much allow anything, because it's literature, and we shouldn't be, stopping people from reading literature. But I just wanna make sure that we're also gonna align with the goals and values of the district, right? And there's some books here that have been brought to my attention that I don't think are in alignment with many people. And so that's one of the things that, I'm trying to understand, where do we go, like, how do we address that? And how does this policy address that, other than just that form, right? Because I don't think we want, having to have every single person or every single parent have to fill out a form for a single book, right? And so that's something that I'm trying to figure out. And then in that same vein, I'm trying to understand, are there any books that we bring in that are required because of grants that we have taken or any other regulations? Are there certain things that we have to have outside, or is it truly up to
I
our
mean, not to
selection?
my knowledge, other than, like Nick mentioned, common school funds, there's some parameters just in general on what that money can be spent on, but it's not like topic-based or anything like that. It's just more like they have to be books people can check out, they have to be book, you know, those kinds of things.
Is there a way to identify books by the students that are, and I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, I mean, there's, the book that I'm thinking has a lot of very explicit language in it. Is there a way for students to identify that these are very explicit in language, or is this, if they happen upon it, they happen upon it?
Not that I know of, I mean, and so I think you're
There-
thinking of,
There's a book
like
rated
years
R.
ago, like on a CD, it might say something.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
well, there are, you know, like age recommendation guidelines, and that's attached to every single book when I catalog it. So, you know, like, it might be leveled 11, 12 as a recommended age level and everything for it. So that's, you know, noted and everything in the catalog. But there's nothing, say, like in the record online that would say, like, this contains explicit language or anything like that.
I'm just trying to think, I mean, you know, there's books with explicit language that I certainly don't want my son or my son or daughter to check out, and I'm just trying to understand right now, like, can he just come into the library as a 7th and 8th grader and just check anything he wants, or is there, and how would I know about that, or, you know, those types of things. So that's what I'm trying to understand a little bit. I think that's some of the concerns that I've had from the parents that have talked to me, and I don't
Okay.
know how that's addressed in the library policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm asserting is that I don't feel the form is really going far enough. I feel like we need to be a little more proactive in that vein.
So you're thinking more at the selection end?
I think
mean,
at the
'cause the only thing
selection
is when you
end-
think of that number of books.
Yeah, I think at the selection end, I think it should be, you know, the committee should be more aware, I guess, of what's coming in. And to a certain extent, honestly, until I saw that one book, I never gave a thought to what's in the school library. I just, you know, I'm very naive apparently, and just assume that there's a level of words that just wouldn't come into the library. That's clearly not true. And so now I'm trying to understand, well, how do we let parents know what is in the library, and should they be concerned, right?
So I understand your point, I'm just trying to think through, I mean, because the remedy of that is more just, I would say, efficiency, a little bit tricky.
I don't have an
You
answer
know,
either, right? Like, and I don't
um,
expect anybody to have an answer right now. I'm just more raising this up to say, I think that, you know, in this library policy, it'd be nice to see something to address that, or give some tools to the parents that have these concerns, right? I get that some parents are completely okay with it, and I'm fine with that too, right? It doesn't,
Right.
that's not my issue. But I do believe parents should have, you know, more control in how they raise their kids, and right now, I think some of the stuff that's out here is definitely more outside of what I think they would expect.
And I would say the other piece that actually, and we could make more explicit in there, is parents can know what their kids are checking out. They can, you know, like, how would you know that if I wanted to know as a parent? I mean,
I think there's that, and then I
some
think,
of that.
right, I think that helps. I just think, and again, for me, you know, I got a wake-up call, right? You know, like, oh, I didn't have any idea this was even in the library. I had no idea my, you know, 12-year-old could go read this book, and it would have never made it to my attention. You know, and so I guess that's my bigger concern. You know, as, you know, maybe when he's older, but at the age he's at right now, I think it would be highly inappropriate that he read some of those books.
And I mean, I guess the other piece I would say is that's what the whole idea of that reconsideration, that, you know, and it shouldn't take forever, that's the idea with the dates, the time limit on it as well,
Right.
is, you know, I mean, the tricky part is with libraries, because we always talk about our community values, but then who's our community? And I
Mhm.
realize that all of you are representatives of
Very
that,
diverse,
and you
yeah.
share that, but it's just, it can get a little bit messy, as you look at, there might be other perspectives as well.
And I completely understand that. So I think, again, this, I'll use this word, I'm gonna commit genericide with this term by the time I'm done with my term here, which is transparency, right? And so
Mhm.
I think there was a complete lack of transparency, for the community as to what's here. And now that I think we're kind of creating some transparency, there's twofold. One, let's be very transparent about what's here, and then two, let's be very transparent about where we go from here, right? And I'm not saying I need an answer, but I think this policy should address that, and I think we do owe it to the community to let them know, what is available to the students.
I have a couple follow-ups on that. So first, I feel like, and I might be wrong about this, but when a kid has a book checked out and it's overdue, I seem to recall seeing emails coming through. Hey, you gotta return your book.
Yeah.
Is there something within Skyward or something else that can alert, hey, this is what the book your kid checked out? Is there anything like that?
I mean, there isn't, because I guess it kind of goes back to Corey's question, like, we don't have books that we flag are bad books.
Right. I
Um,
just don't know.
We
I
would
just
have
think
books that if we went through the process would just be removed, if we
Right.
felt like they, they should not be here.
I just didn't know if that was maybe a tool that maybe is available that we aren't utilizing. I know we get emails, I don't know if it says what book has been checked out. They might just be generic, like, hey, you have a book overdue.
When
I
they,
think it doesn't
wh-
happen
to,
until
to answer
they're
that, when the, cause that notice is sent out every Monday morning, so when that overdue notice is sent out, it does list, I believe, like the materials that the student has out, that are overdue, but there's nothing in the system that allows me to, email like, okay, Johnny just checked out this, and this, if that makes sense.
Okay, I was just curious.
However, to answer that though, I have had, parents in the past who, like their kids bring books home and they screen those books and they send them back with a note to me saying like, I don't feel that something like this is appropriate for my child. And like I then flag their accounts so that when, say, like one of my aides or something, puts in their lunch number, it's gonna say, cannot check out anything from this age level, cannot check out anything with this type of content, or like Mr. Kotek needs to screen before sending this home, things like that,
Okay.
based on those conversations with those parents.
And just so I understand transparency, Corey, what does that look like though? Do we put a list of all of our content, like on the website, and update it when we are getting these 400 or 500 new books in every year? Or how do you vision transparency?
So it's a difficult question because I know a lot of it comes down to what do I feel is acceptable, what do you feel is acceptable, right? Like it's very subjective in that way. I think some fine lines, can be put in place, like just explicit language. Like there's some things, right? Like, song lyrics, they hit a criteria, right? So very simple. And I think there's some books that, very quickly fall into these are explicit. These have sexual content, these have, whatever, right? And I think, at least some of those would help, I think, people understand better, what it is that they're checking out. I don't have an answer for you, that's why I'm surfacing it, but I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what other schools do either. I know it's becoming, we're not the only school to be having this conversation right now, I know that.
Yeah.
So there may be some new standards that come on, I have no idea.
I don't know what it looks like either, but I hear you.
What kind of nightmare would it be, Nick, or would it even be possible to, like if we had if you could do some sort of rating system of, come up with something for the 12 to 15-year-old range, or 12 and 13, this isn't appropriate,
Well, that
or explicit material, this book is rated whatever, you wanna call it rated R.
yeah, so
and then-
so those age recommendations already come from the publishers, and then
Okay.
they also come from the vendors that I purchased the books from, and that's screened then by other professional librarians who have more time than I do to read every single book. So that's where like those age recommendations come into play.
So
Um,
if you had a book that was not, let's say, not age appropriate for a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
and of course son came to check it out, it would get flagged at the,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they wouldn't be allowed to check it out.
Yes, then they wouldn't be allowed to check it out. So, as far as like a rating system goes, we'd have to hire another person. Like, I mean, honestly, like I have so much on my plate right now as it is, to sit and like really go through every single book and, you know, try and rate it and everything, I would not humanly be possible. It's just
And I
not.
don't think a new system needs to be made. I mean, if we're getting guidelines from the publishers, from the vendors, again, because having one person in our district or reading each book, it is all just circumstance and opinion. I'd rather go with professional readings on those.
Well, and I guess the only caveat I would say to that is here we are. We're already using that, right? And clearly I have concerns. I have other parents that come to me that have concerns. So I find it completely unacceptable for my son to check out some of those books, completely unacceptable. And the way it is today, I would never know.
Do you know if those books, if he would be allowed to though? If he
As it is right now, yeah. And
Yeah,
if
okay.
somebody would have brought to my attention that book was here, I would never know. And why would I even think about it?
But is he in the age range to check it out?
I don't know. I mean, you know, the way it is with kids, one kid checks it out, reads it, says, hey, you gotta
Right.
check this out, right? I mean, it's available, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, I
I
understand
wouldn't,
that.
I wouldn't leave, you know, Playboy magazine sitting on the table at home for my kids to read. You know, it's just not appropriate. And I'm not saying that's what we have here, but we have things that, in my opinion, are very inappropriate, based on the current guidelines we have today.
And I guess I would encourage in the short term to use that reconsideration policy because, that's exactly what it's for. I mean, it gets a group of people to read the entire product to kind of make a value judgment on it,
Right.
basically.
The problem I have with that is that you're tasking the parents with coming through and rating the entire library, right? That's it, all you're doing is shifting who's doing the rating at that point. I don't have the time to come and look at every single book in the library and decide what's appropriate for my son, right? Like
Right.
that's not feasible. And so, again, I don't have an answer, but I also don't think that form, this is what I'm saying, I don't think that form's proactive enough, right?
So I understand that piece. I'm just saying in the interim or in the
Right.
immediate.
Sure, I could fill it out for the 2 books I know, right?
That-
Unless somebody brings me the other 10 or 20 books I might not agree with, I'm not gonna know they're there either.
Nick, do you have an idea when approximately the age ranges that explicit language or sexual content, anything like that would
To be
start?
honest, I see it in everything. Like if I, you know, select a book that's even, you know, leveled for 5 through 8, it's probably gonna have swearing in it. That's just kind of like the direction of the publishing world right now. So I mean, it's kind of like when you turn on the TV, you're seeing the exact same stuff. You're seeing the same stuff in movies. It's the same thing when it comes to books and everything too. Because I know, like one of the last books that I, you know, read, I think was leveled for 5.8 and it had swearing and everything in it. I guess I don't mean to like throw this out there as far as, you know, like it's just parents' responsibility, but I know like when my daughter checks out books, I take a look at what she's reading, and if I don't think it's appropriate for her, then I as a parent step in and I say, I don't want you reading this. Like she actually asked me to purchase this book called They Both Die in the End. Awesome book, really, really good. But I know, you know, I've read it myself, and I'm like, you're just not old enough to read that yet.
And maybe, Nick, that's a good starting place is to, and I don't know what the language looks like, but to let the school know, like, listen, books in the library today aren't like they were when I was a kid, right? And I guess, I don't know, maybe that's the best way to say it, right? And, you know, when I was a kid, there wasn't a single book in the grade school that would have had a swear word in it, like, end of story, full stop. And so, you know, I think, again, we don't realize the world changes. Clearly it does, right? Certainly look at TV, right? So yeah, your point's very, very well taken there. It makes a lot of sense. And maybe part of it is just a, you know, expectation setting, right? Listen, your kids check out books and they're not the books you used to check out.
Right. And or even as you talk about, like an open house, or, I mean, because there's also a lot of really high quality.
Right, I'm just
That we
picking out
have,
the things I
you
don't
know.
agree with. I'm sure there's a ton of, I mean, my son brings a ton of books home and he loves them, you know, and both my kids are bookworms. They read nonstop. So yeah, they get a ton of great content too, don't get me wrong. I think that's all I had.
any other, I mean, you'll have another round as we get into the new business as well. All right, 21, 22, I'll call it the fall COVID plan. Kind of continuing on from last year, I will just say as of 7/29 on August 9th, this is what our plan is, and based on the situations that happen in our county and in our region, it could possibly change. But we still meet with county schools and Triple County Public Health, not weekly at this time, but every other week. And we do know cases in Triple County have been rising, they bumped up at this time, and it actually goes from the board meeting in May where we had board action that was taken, that masks, we would recommend that students and staff follow CDC guidelines, but they're not required, that they would be optional for students and staff. Again, if we had some type of a mandate or an order, we would follow that. The only other piece that I would say, and this is sort of just because it's new, so we don't have a lot of guidance. When you hear about the federal ESSER, they call it, funds or COVID funds that schools are getting, when we have to write our plan for the round, they call it round 3, we have to justify how closely we are following CDC recommendations. Now, it doesn't say yet, like, you don't get the money if you don't follow CDC recommendations. You have to just justify what you're doing. And as that, it's probably gonna be more like October when we actually have to write that plan. We still don't know exactly even the funds that we would get. That also might be a factor that we think about, because it would be significant dollars if we had to follow some parameters that we could lose. And I would say as much as things change, they could change, I guess, for the better or worse between now and October. One of the main differences that will happen this coming school year, though, is around close contacts quarantine. So in the past, Jessica Hager, our school nurse, would look at cameras, try to figure out quarantines, talk to people, and then call parents. This coming year, because people who are vaccinated, if they don't have symptoms, wouldn't necessarily have to quarantine, but we don't necessarily know who's vaccinated, not vaccinated. So what we do is we would let public health know. Let's say I'm positive, they would look at the seating chart, say, here's the people that were close contacts to Jenny, send that to public health, and then they know who's vaccinated, who's got a quarantine, and they do those contacts. We would not do the quarantine contacts this coming year. We just let them know, here's who was sitting by that individual or wherever, if they sat by somebody on the bus, and then they figure out if people have to quarantine or not, and they do that notification. So that's a big change, and I'll say workload wise, and just trying to figure it out wise, that actually would be very helpful to us. We are gonna keep in place all of the cleaning protocols that we've had, encouraging the frequent hand washing. The other thing you might have heard on the news is there was a big push at the state level for schools to do COVID testing. At this time, we are not planning to provide that. If, the interest of the board changed, we could consider that, but our thought is people who are interested in testing or vaccinations should be able to find a place to get that done. If they don't, they should connect with Jessica Hager. She's very good about helping families with that. Again, maybe that changes, but at this time, we just feel like that's not our role or necessarily where we want to spend our efforts. We aren't maintaining the specific cohorts during kind of the recess like we were in the past. We would still ask if people are experiencing symptoms that they stay home. And the final, and I just worded it as we would follow WIAA protocols and requirements, because those could change often as the years go, as you go through the year, or it could be different depending on different sports. So if we just, as they change, we would follow whatever those parameters are, because we're gonna wanna participate. So this isn't anything for action, it's more just for information. As I said, maybe things will change. I can tell you, this is pretty similar to all public schools, and I think even all schools in Triple County. Stanley Boyd is actually starting school on the 19th. Cornell starts a little bit early too, I'm not sure when. So, we'll kind of watch them to see how things go there, because they're looking at the same parameters. So I don't know if just board members have thoughts to share, but like I said, I did not put this for action, because I feel like it's too early to do something dramatic with that anyway, but I also knew people would have questions, so we wanted to say, here's kind of how we have left it.
Will it surprise anybody that have questions?
Pardon?
Will it surprise anybody that have questions?
No, I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
So the first one, the massive school, I
Yes.
see we purposely worded as we recommend
Mhm.
that students and staff follow the CDC guidelines, so it's not worded as that we will follow CDC
Correct.
guidelines, right? So it's pretty subjective there. I feel that's probably on purpose. I guess the only thing that I would ask is that if the CDC changes their guidelines, that before we enact things, that the board would get a chance to weigh in.
And they would actually have to, because our
Okay.
current motion is that they're optional.
Okay.
So if we do anything other than optional, that would require a board action to say it's whatever it's gonna be. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
I guess, does that kind of negate that first point then, as far as the,
I mean, other than, as you said, it's, I would say a little bit generic on purpose. Part of that is, just like I said, is we're looking at grant applications, we also don't wanna look like we're disregarding CDC recommendations.
right, no, understood.
So, as families look at those recommendations around if you're vaccinated, wearing a mask indoors, if you're not, because the other piece for us is we don't necessarily know who's vaccinated or not. And we just feel like it's not efficient for us to try to keep track of any of that.
Are we, so on a different point then, that you're talking about there as far as who's vaccinated, who's not, are we worried about the fact that even though we don't know who's vaccinated, that as soon as we send somebody home, it's gonna be pretty clear that they're not vaccinated, so, if somebody gets quarantined, it's because they're not vaccinated, right? So it's gonna be obvious to everybody very quickly who's vaccinated, who's not.
I guess I would say possibly, but I think there have been some vaccinated people that have gotten symptoms that have also had to quarantine. And, we still, yes, people, it's not necessarily a secret if someone doesn't come to school for 10 days, that they might be quarantined, but that's not information that we share.
Right, but it's
And-
pretty obvious though.
I guess, I don't know how else we account for that or control that.
I'm just raising the issue, right? Like, I wanna make sure that we're clear that while we're not saying, hey, you're not vaccinated, it's gonna be public information pretty quickly based on how the policy's written.
I would say
Well,
people,
it's still presumptuous though, because people are getting, the second variant here that have been vaccinated, so.
Right,
a
but based on our
person can
policy though,
speculate
we're
whatever
only,
they want.
right, but based on the policy, we're quarantining based on the fact that they haven't been vaccinated.
I would say, I'll clarify, we are not quarantining anyone.
Understood
I wanna make sure that's very clear.
Right, but based on the parameters that they're using, it's also because they're not vaccinated, right? Like
Or
that's-
it could be, there is, and this is also why we're letting them be in charge, and now don't quote me on this, cause this is their business, not mine, but there's something about, like, if you're more than 3 feet and both people had a mask on, you don't have to quarantine. Like, there are other factors that I don't even honestly know well enough to speak to them well, but, I think again, it's just sort of like even before, yes, things are confidential, but we also we are gonna be required to follow quarantines. We're not gonna, if someone's quarantined, say, just come on back.
No, I understand that, and again, my only concern in kind of raising this is more the fact that, when it comes to HIPAA, we're trying to do the most we can to respect that, and I understand that we aren't specifically stating it, and they aren't specifically stating it, but it doesn't take that much to draw the conclusion either. And I just wanna,
Right.
Be clear about that, right? So, if we go with that, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, I'm just saying like, my only concern is that we're creating, the, hey, you're vaccinated, hey, you're not vaccinated, and now what does that end up doing to the community?
Well, and I would say though, there's also the variation of physical distancing requirements that plays into that.
Well, there's gonna be people that.
And
go
we won't
home-
know why.
Right,
Go home that are quarantined, that have been vaccinated, and if they have symptoms, they're
Right.
gonna be quarantined
Right.
and stay home.
Still.
right.
The only vaccinated ones that get to come back are the ones that aren't experiencing any symptoms. So, there could be that also.
Because they will also follow it's like a 7-day, 10-day, so if you're quarantined and don't have symptoms and have a negative test in 7 days, you're able to come back. Or some people, but some people choose not to get tested, and that's fine, then they just do whatever length of
I think in general, this will be almost a weekly or bi-weekly issue that we're dealing with, I'm assuming, right? Based on how often it changes right now in the news, so.
No, we're not.
Well, and I feel like the masks is the part that maybe something may have to change. The close contact quarantines, at least that won't, I am hoping that never becomes our business again, just because now it's even more complex than it was last year, and it was plenty complex last year. I mean, cleaning protocols, we will definitely keep in place. I mean, the only other thing is, and we will kind of have what I'll call back shelf plans. I mean, if we have to do a hybrid, if we have to do something, or if we're forced to close for a period of time, I mean, we'll deal with that as we have, but that's not, our plan is to be as regular as possible. Whatever regular means nowadays is the $1 million question.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or feedback? Technically, no. But we can survey them. Is that something you'd like to do?
Yes.
So the question was just like if we did a staff survey to see, get input.
Anonymously, I'm assuming.
Yes. Okay,
You do staff surveys, you do parent surveys as well.
sure. Now I want to be clear though, just so that I'm saying, is it just on mask requirements?
I'm not sure. What is a survey on that?
Or is it?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I feel like
I
that's
think
the hottest
right,
topic.
Quarantines and stuff are gonna tend to take care of themselves.
Okay, I got a question, I'm sorry. So just regarding the surveys, what is the purpose of it though? Because I don't wanna give the impression that we're gonna change. Yes, because we are recommending that we are gonna follow the CDC guidelines, and is the survey gonna give the impression that we're looking for your input and the majority wins? Right.
I just wanna know how our staff feels.
I hear that.
I'm curious
That's
too, but
all.
I
Yes.
agree that if we send a survey and overwhelmingly they say we all want masks in school, and then we don't do that.
It feels weird because we're already at odds right now with that first statement based on the current policy, right? So our policy is gonna state that, or this new policy is stating that we're following recommended CDC guidelines, but that's not true because until the board makes a different decision, we're not changing anything.
Okay, I was just wondering more of the purpose of the survey.
I just feel a survey gives the impression that we're gonna listen to what you say and use that information to make decisions, and that's not necessarily true.
Will it be?
We can say that in the survey, we can
Yeah.
say, none of this will impact, we're just curious how you feel.
Well, I don't say give us your opinion, but we're not gonna use it.
I don't really care, but.
That's not how surveys work.
We're all kind of under the impression that we're gonna be back here revisiting this sometime in the future, correct? So that's why I would like to get the survey to know when we do have to come back to this later, hopefully, maybe we won't.
So I guess for me, on the survey, and this is like anything else, right? If we get a survey and I don't agree with the results, I can make my vote public, and then I can either get elected or not reelected, right? And so I understand what you're saying is, we may or may not follow it, but that's our right as a board member to
Right.
vote either way we want to. I understand what you're saying is we give a survey and the survey comes back, 90% wear masks, and we got 100% results from every single person, and we go, no masks. What does that say? Well, we might all be out of a board seat,
I'm just saying we're not necessarily gonna follow opinions of people, we're gonna follow CDC guidelines, is what we're saying.
Well, and I think,
Well, that's
so
what
I'll
you're saying,
clarify,
but I don't
because
think it's what
that's,
Al's saying.
I think and maybe that sentence, as Corey said, is too confusing, because it doesn't say we are following, it just says we recommend kind of for families to consider that, and maybe if that sentence is confusing, I can just remove that. For me, it was just a way to show that we recognize that they're there and that they have guidance for schools. I can tell you, based on other schools, more likely what will happen is you'll have a different result from staff than you will from families. And then you'll have to make a decision based on that.
And again, I wasn't
that's-
picking on the language to pick on the language, I'm a big fan of
But I don't want
what
it to
is,
be confusing either.
right, and that's my point, is I'm a big fan of what is the situation, right?
Yeah.
And that language doesn't match what the truth currently is, and that was why I was kind of picking on it a little bit, right? Because I just wanna make sure that what we say is what we actually mean and what we're doing.
Well, and I want people to understand accurately what it is,
Right, right.
so I think I'll clean that up as well.
So are you canceling the survey for now, or keep?
I mean, because I did not schedule this for action, because I didn't think we would have action at this time, but, I mean, in general, I would say if board members think a survey will help them down the road, we can do it, or we can do one at a later time.
When we talk about it at the next committee meeting, if you wanna really talk about it, hash out then, or doing it now.
Might be a good time.
Okay.
I agree.
And then I'll bring this back, and I'll clean that up a little bit too,
We'll get the survey and then the world will change 3 days later anyway, so.
if that's what it takes. Other, thoughts on that, input? Okay, seclusion restraint report, this every year annually is required to be shared at the board level. There are very specific legal guidelines and a lot of restrictions on seclusion and restraint, as far as people have to have specific training, to be involved in that. And so we have to kind of by building say seclusion or restraint, was it used, and then around, if it was students with disabilities or not. So this isn't a report for approval, but it is for information to the board, just to know. And I'll just say it's been very few times the last few years, partially because, the law is very restrictive on when it can be used.
So if a cop is called to the school, then that doesn't necessarily mean either one of these.
If they, so like if law enforcement places someone under arrest, that is a little bit different. Because then they are following their parameters about arrest and whatever their laws and rules are. These would be our staff. Good question. Okay. Strategic planning update, I just wanted to touch base, so the committee meeting, I will bring back the board met with Drew Howick to kind of get all of the input from the in-person session and the online sessions. Many of the things, have stayed similar, other than having the language be more understandable kind of to the average person. Sometimes in education, we're guilty of using our own lingo and forgetting about that. So, that's a piece. The other piece that Al, when I talked to him, brought up, when we talked about, one of them is live streaming the board meetings, but also, last year we started live streaming athletic events and some of those kinds of things. We would continue to do those. So that's a piece that I added as well. So that will come back to the board on the 30th at the committee meeting. And I don't know if board members have other specific comments, but I feel like we kind of are, pretty much at a finalized place. And then after that meeting, if the board agrees, then we'll share it out with the community, so everybody can see it again. We kind of said we'd re-share it out and then work on our annual plans from that.
So you might have said this, and I might have missed it. The strategic plan that is currently linked right now, has that been updated since the last board meeting?
No.
Okay. And so when do those changes go into this draft?
It'll, before August 30th.
Okay.
So whenever you get the background agenda for that meeting. I mean, hopefully before then, but that's the deadline for that.
Is there a plan to, accept community feedback before we finalize it?
We talked about that a little bit, I mean, that we could put it on the website with another online comment. You know, how do we do something without doing the same event
Right.
necessarily repeat?
thing, yeah.
So I would be fine with that. If board members have other thoughts, that's fine too. Cause it's true, some things we were able to incorporate, but some things we did not.
Good progress and good feedback, what I've seen so far.
The WSB, just want to remind board members, the fall regional meetings. So, right now, they are in person And we're Region 4, so October 12th, that is at the Stout Ale House. One of the things I wanted to make sure to mention is they always have kind of a learning piece that goes before that from 4 to 6 p.m. And this year it's on effective community engagement, and that's something we've talked about a lot. So that's something board members could possibly might be interested in. And the meeting is from 6 to 9. So that's October 12th at the Stout Ale House in Menominee. If you're interested, just let myself or Sue know. We'll get people signed up. There is an online regional meeting, October 27th, if you can't go on the 12th. The other piece I will say, if you look on their website link, I mean, they have them around the state. So you can go, you don't have to go to our region if there's a different date that works better for you. Let's see where all of them are. And the other piece is just a reminder of the online events. They are, because of COVID trying to do, I know there's some more specific training around for presidents, things like that coming up as well. And any of those, some of them are no cost. For example, they have legislative updates that are a no cost. Some of them are, just let myself or Sue know if you're interested in attending any of those. So there's roles and responsibilities of school board presidents. The legal and legislative updates, those are always no cost. Administrator contracts, and then that's the online regional meeting. You can also look, there's recorded ones from before, if there's something that you think I'd like to learn more about FMLA or election notices or something. So just let myself or Sue know. I just want to make sure people are aware of that, because they do a lot of work, and I feel like they do a good job at trying to give you the information that you need. All right, anybody for new business? So I'll turn it back to you now.
Well, new business, the first one is the library plan. I think with what Corey had talked about, I think we'd like to table that. Can we table that one?
You need a motion.
We get a motion,
Second.
I'll make a motion to table that.
motion by Corey, I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next one, I need a motion to approve our shared occupational therapist agreement with Stanley Boyd.
Make the motion.
Motion by Chrissy,
I'll second.
second by Becca. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion to approve the elementary student handbook.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Cedric,
I'll second.
second by Becca. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion to approve the junior, senior high school student handbook.
Make that motion.
Motion by Chrissy,
I'll second it.
second by Cedric. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion to approve our educational standards. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Second by Chrissy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approve our visitor and adult student ticket athletic prices.
Make the motion.
I'll second it. I have a comment. Is this for, wait
Visitors.
For visitors to us.
Visitors to us,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
And it hasn't, I mean, it's been $2, $4,
Yeah,
but I don't.
yep.
Motion by Chrissy, second by Cedric. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approve complimentary tickets for all community members.
Make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Chrissy, second by Brad.
Just a clarification.
Yep.
So that would be for visiting?
Those are for community, so kinda community, adults
Okay.
and students. And, I mean, sometimes people ask how we police that,
You don't really.
other than asking people and expecting them to be honest. It isn't, like, you don't have to have proof that you're a community member necessarily, because I don't know what that would be.
It's a small community.
People usually know, I guess, and I don't believe we've had an issue with it.
All in favor?
Lose conference games and sectionals and stuff.
Yeah, so some of those, there are some of those that, due to WIA rules, have to have charges with them. These would be just ours.
I guess my clarification would be with the next one then, because aren't all those people also?
They are, other than, so technically, those would be people even in other communities.
Oh, okay, that's what that.
That's the difference.
Okay, so we're on G. All,
Sorry.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We need a motion to approve complimentary passage for,
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
motion by Brad, second by Chrissy. This motion is for all the doctors, clergy, board members, VFW, color guard, ambulance crew, and their spouse or guest. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We need to approve the National Lunch Program.
Also move.
I'll second.
Motion by Cedric, second by Becca.
So do we have to approve this at the end of the meeting and do, or is that lunch prices?
That's lunch prices.
Lunch prices is different than this.
And that'll be interesting because this year, the USDA still has free lunch, but, I mean, technically, the annual meeting would still say,
We'll have to do that.
because we do adult prices as well.
Correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion for hazardous transportation areas.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Becca, I'll second it. Can you talk a little bit about what this is?
So what that is, so the law talks about school districts are required to transport students who are outside of 2 miles of their district boundaries. Our hazardous transportation area, because, we have students that cross Highway 27, we have transportation available to any student in our district. They might have to walk in town to a pickup spot. And we get transportation aid from the state, and so this allows us to say, because of this hazardous reason is why we're providing extra transportation, so that we can claim it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
Motion by Chrissy, second by Cory. And we are adjourned.